The fusion relay sparked again. Rowan Hayes leaned back just in time to avoid losing his eyebrows for the third time that evening, which he considered impressive, given that he only technically had two eyebrows to begin with. He stared at the relay with the tired resentment usually reserved for ex-partners and tax auditors. "You and I," he said calmly, pointing a grease-stained wrench at the open engine compartment, "are no longer on speaking terms." The relay answered by emitting a faint whining noise, like it was personally offended. Outside the open hangar door, the rain fell in endless silver lines beneath Edgewater's dim orbital lamps. The colony never had proper daylight. The nearby gas giant swallowed most of the system's sun, leaving everything bathed in a permanent twilight that made even noon feel like a guilty secret. Rowan didn't mind. Twilight suited him. Twilight didn't ask questions. Behind him, his service drone emitted a confused chirp. Unit K7 was shaped vaguely like a metal barrel balanced on three uneven legs. One of its optical lenses flickered constantly, which gave it the permanent expression of someone trying very hard to understand a joke they were too embarrassed to ask about. "Don't look at me like that," Rowan muttered. "You're the one who handed me the defective relay." K7 rotated its top half defensively, emitting a series of indignant clicks. "Oh, now you have opinions," Rowan said. "Where were those opinions when this thing tried to assassinate my face?" The drone extended one thin mechanical arm and pointed helpfully at the relay. Rowan narrowed his eyes. "Yes," he said, "I'm aware that the relay is the problem. Thank you for that stunning technical analysis." K7 chirped again, smugly. Rowan sighed and leaned forward, carefully reconnecting the relay's housing. His hands moved with the slow precision of someone who had learned long ago that rushing only created new problems disguised as progress. He liked machines. Machines were honest. When machines broke, they did so openly. No secrets, no lies, no pretending to be something else. People, on the other hand, specialized in surprise. The relay hummed softly as power flowed through it. Rowan waited, watching for instability. The hum deepened, stabilizing into a steady vibration. He nodded. "There," he said. "See? We talked it out." Behind him, thunder rolled faintly through the colony's artificial sky. Edgewater Colony existed at the very edge of mapped space, clinging to a rocky moon that most star charts politely ignored. It had been built quickly, cheaply, and with the quiet expectation that nobody important would ever need to visit, which was exactly why Rowan had chosen it. Nobody important ever came here. Nobody important ever knocked on his door. The knock came 3 seconds later. Rowan froze. He stayed perfectly still, wrench still in hand, listening. Another knock followed, soft, polite. Rowan frowned. Nobody polite ever knocked on his hangar door at this hour. Polite people had better places to be. K7 rotated toward the entrance, its optical lens narrowing as it attempted to identify the visitor through the rain-streaked exterior camera feed. The drone emitted a confused chirp. "Yeah," Rowan said quietly. "I don't recognize that either." He stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag that had long ago surrendered any hope of cleanliness. The knock came again, not louder, not impatient, just persistent. That bothered him more than anything else. Desperate people knock loudly. Confident people didn't need to knock at all. But this was something else. Rowan stepped toward the door, his boots echoing faintly across the metal floor. The rain beyond the entrance shimmered under the colony's dim lights, distorting everything beyond it into vague shapes and shadows. He reached the control panel, paused. "You ever get the feeling," he said to K7, "that opening a door is statistically the worst decision a person can make?" K7 emitted an encouraging beep. "That's easy for you to say," Rowan muttered. "Nobody ever ruins your life." He pressed the release. The door slid open with a soft, mechanical sigh. She stood there, unmoving, framed by falling rain and flickering light. At first, Rowan's brain refused to process what he was seeing. It tried to categorize her into something familiar. A traveler, a colonist, a courier. But none of those explanations survived longer than a heartbeat. She looked like a human woman. Almost. Her posture was straight despite the exhaustion in her face. Dark hair clung to her skin in rain-soaked strands. Her clothes were travel-worn, coated in fine dust beneath the water, as if she had crossed more distance than Edgewater was meant to accommodate. But it was her ears that broke the illusion. They rose in smooth, elegant arcs from the sides of her head, longer than human ears, shaped with quiet precision. Not exaggerated, not grotesque, just undeniably not human. Rowan's brain finally caught up. "Oh," he said. It was not his most intelligent response. She studied him with calm, steady eyes. Not aggressive, not pleading, evaluating, like someone checking whether reality had met expectations. Water dripped from her hair onto the metal floor between them. Rowan realized he was still holding the wrench. He lowered it slowly. "I should mention," he said carefully, "I don't usually open my door to mysterious strangers in the rain. It's a bad habit I've been trying to avoid." She didn't smile. That somehow made everything worse. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence with its endless whisper. Then she said in a quiet, steady voice, "My mother sent me to you." Rowan blinked. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I think you may have the wrong mechanic." Her gaze didn't waver. "She told me," the woman continued, "that if everything failed, I should find the human who helped her without asking why." Something cold moved slowly through Rowan's chest. A memory surfaced, uninvited. Fire, screaming metal, a transport ship collapsing into itself, and inside it, a woman with long ears, barely conscious, staring at him with the same quiet intensity. He hadn't asked questions then. He hadn't wanted answers. He had just helped. Rowan exhaled slowly. The rain continued falling between them, patient and indifferent. He realized, with the quiet certainty of someone watching their life change direction, that nothing about this night was accidental. Behind him, K7 emitted a curious chirp. Rowan glanced back at the drone. "Well," he murmured, "this is new." He looked at her again. She hadn't moved. She hadn't asked to come inside. She had only delivered the message, and waited. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck, rain-cooled air drifting into the hangar. "This," he said carefully, "is usually the part where I make a decision I regret." For the first time, her expression shifted slightly. Not hope, not relief, just attention. Rowan stepped aside from the doorway. "Come in," he said, and somewhere deep inside him, something quiet and carefully protected began to change. She didn't move immediately. Rowan stood there, half inside his hangar, half inside the consequences of his own decision, wondering if there was still time to pretend he had meant something else. The rain continued falling behind her, steady and patient, as if it knew she would eventually follow it inside or disappear back into it. She studied him, not nervously, not gratefully, carefully. It was the look of someone who had learned that trust was a mechanical system, fragile, precise, and prone to catastrophic failure if assembled incorrectly. Rowan shifted his weight. "I should warn you," he said, "my hospitality package is extremely limited. I have water, recycled air, and a chair that only collapses sometimes." She stepped forward. The movement was smooth, deliberate, and completely silent. Water dripped from her boots as she crossed the threshold, and Rowan noticed the way her eyes moved, not darting around in fear, but scanning with purpose. She wasn't overwhelmed by the unfamiliar environment. She was mapping it. Every exit, every blind spot, every object that could be used, repurposed, or weaponized. Rowan had seen soldiers do that. He found himself strangely offended. "I promise," he said dryly, closing the door behind her, "I'm not planning to ambush you with aggressive furniture." Her gaze shifted to him. For a moment she said nothing. Then she tilted her head slightly, studying his face with an intensity that made him suddenly aware of how little sleep he'd gotten and how long it had been since he'd shaved. "You joke," she said. It wasn't a question. "It's a survival strategy," Rowan replied. "Statistically, people who joke are harder to kill. Nobody wants to deal with that kind of personality." Behind him, K7 rolled forward, its uneven legs clicking softly against the metal floor. The drone stopped 2 meters away from her and rotated its optical lens upward, focusing directly on her face, It emitted a cautious chirp. She froze. Not dramatically, not visibly to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But Rowan noticed. Her muscles tightened slightly, her breathing slowed. Assessing. Rowan gestured casually toward the drone. That's K7, he said. He's mostly harmless. Emotionally fragile, but harmless. K7 emitted an indignant beep. He still hasn't forgiven me for replacing his original processor, Rowan added. The drone rotated toward Rowan and extended its thin mechanical arm in what could only be described as an accusatory gesture. She watched the interaction closely. There was something in her expression Rowan couldn't quite place. Confusion, curiosity, or maybe recognition. She stepped past the drone, moving deeper into the hangar. Her wet boots left faint prints on the metal floor. Rowan noticed her glance at the suspended cargo hauler in the center of the room, its engine compartment still open. Her gaze lingered on the fusion relay. You repaired it, she said. Rowan blinked. Yes. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It was failing. Yes, Rowan said slowly. She stepped closer to the hauler, examining the exposed components with quiet focus. The relay housing was misaligned, she said. It would have destabilized again. Rowan frowned. He hadn't mentioned that. He watched as she reached up and adjusted a coupling node by less than a centimeter. The movement was precise, effortless. The relay's hum shifted, becoming smoother, more stable. Rowan stared. I was going to fix that, he said defensively. She looked at him. You didn't. He opened his mouth, closed it, considered arguing, decided against it. That's fair, he admitted. K7 emitted a helpful chirp, clearly pleased with this outcome. Rowan glared at the drone. You're on thin ice. The drone chirped again, smugly. She turned away from the engine and faced him fully now. Up close, he could see the details more clearly. Her ears curved upward with elegant symmetry, their shape refined and unmistakable. Not an accident of biology, not random, designed, or evolved with terrifying efficiency. Her face, despite the exhaustion, held a calm strength. She wasn't fragile. She was tired. There was a difference. You remember her, she said. It wasn't a question. Rowan hesitated. Yes, he said finally. Fragments of the memory surfaced again. Smoke, heat, her mother's blood on his hands, and those same ears. He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't know she had a daughter. Her expression softened, just slightly. She didn't know if she would survive, Lyssa said quietly. She only knew that you helped her. Rowan shrugged awkwardly. She looked like she needed help. Lyssa studied him carefully. You didn't ask what she was. Rowan met her gaze. I didn't need to. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just full. K7 broke it by rolling forward and extending a small scanning probe toward Lyssa. Rowan sighed. K7, he said. We talked about this. You can't scan guests without permission. It's rude. The drone paused, then slowly retracted the probe. Lyssa watched this with visible fascination. It obeys you, she said. Sometimes, Rowan replied. Other times it pretends to malfunction out of spite. K7 emitted an offended beep. Lyssa crouched slightly, lowering herself to the drone's level. She extended her hand slowly, deliberately, giving it time to react. K7 hesitated, then extended its probe cautiously. The tip of the probe touched her fingers. The drone emitted a soft, uncertain chirp. Lyssa smiled. It was small, unexpected, and for a moment, she didn't look like the most dangerous fugitive in the galaxy. She looked like someone who hadn't touched anything gentle in a very long time. Rowan looked away quickly, pretending to check a nearby console, because something about that moment made him uncomfortable. Not because it was dangerous, because it wasn't. He cleared his throat. You can stay here tonight, he said. After that, we'll figure something out. Lyssa stood slowly. Her eyes met his again. You don't know who is looking for me. Rowan shrugged. I try not to know things that would ruin my day. She studied him, searching for something. Fear, regret, common sense. She found none of those things. Only stubbornness, and something else. something she hadn't expected. Outside, a patrol cruiser passed overhead, its searchlights briefly illuminating the hangar walls. Lyssa didn't move, but Rowan saw the way her breathing slowed again. Stillness. Controlled. Prepared. He leaned casually against the console. "You know," he said, "this is definitely the strangest Tuesday I've had in months." Lyssa tilted her head slightly. "It's Thursday," she said. Rowan paused. "That explains a lot," he admitted. K7 chirped in agreement, and for the first time since she had arrived, Lyssa didn't look like she was standing in the rain anymore. Rowan woke up to the sound of metal tapping metal. It was a precise sound, controlled, intentional, which immediately ruled out K7. Rowan opened one eye cautiously, staring at the dim ceiling of his sleeping quarters. The colony's artificial night cycle was still active, bathing the room in a dull blue glow that made everything feel submerged in cold water. The tapping came again. He didn't move right away. He had learned over the years that reacting too quickly was the fastest way to discover something unpleasant. Instead, he listened. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. Not random, deliberate. He exhaled slowly and rolled onto his side, reaching for the small handheld scanner on the table beside his bed. He activated it, and the display flickered to life, showing the interior layout of the hangar. 2 heat signatures. One was K7, its core glowing faintly in the corner. The other stood near the suspended cargo hauler. Lyssa. Rowan stared at the scanner for a moment longer. Still there. Still real. Still his problem. He sighed and sat up, rubbing his face. "This," he muttered to himself, "is why I stopped helping strangers." He pulled on his jacket and stepped out into the hangar. The air was cooler now, the heating system cycling lazily through its routine. Lyssa stood beneath the open engine compartment, one arm raised, holding a thin diagnostic filament between her fingers. The filament glowed faintly, feeding information into a small device resting in her palm. She didn't turn around. "You should replace the secondary coil," she said calmly. Rowan stopped walking. "Good morning to you too." She turned then, her expression neutral but alert. "You heard me," Rowan added. "I did," she said. She lowered the filament and stepped away from the engine. The faint glow of the colony's external lights caught the edges of her ears, outlining their smooth, unmistakable shape. Rowan leaned against a nearby console. "You've been busy." "Yes." He waited. She didn't elaborate. Rowan nodded slowly. "Do you always break into people's engine systems before breakfast?" She tilted her head slightly. It was already broken. He considered that. "That's not the point." She studied him for a moment. "You are not angry." Rowan shrugged. "I haven't had my coffee yet. My emotional range is currently very limited." Behind him, K7 emitted a sleepy chirp, rolling forward unsteadily as its systems finished their startup cycle. Lyssa watched the drone approach. "It trusts me," she said quietly. Rowan glanced at K7. The drone stopped beside her, extending its probe without hesitation. Rowan frowned. "That's suspicious," he said. K7 ignored him. Lyssa gently touched the probe, and the drone emitted a soft, pleased tone. Rowan crossed his arms. "I've known that machine for 6 years," he said. "It still doesn't trust me." K7 rotated toward him and emitted a dismissive beep. Lyssa almost smiled again. Almost. Rowan pushed himself off the console and walked toward the cargo hauler. He examined the engine compartment, following the adjustments she had made overnight. She was right. The secondary coil was destabilizing. He hadn't noticed it. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. "You've done this before," he said. "Yes." "Where?" She hesitated. That hesitation told him everything. Somewhere important. Somewhere he wasn't supposed to know about. Rowan nodded. "Fair enough." He stepped back, wiping his hands on his jacket. Outside, the colony was beginning its artificial morning cycle. Faint vibrations echoed through the structure as distant systems powered up. Edgewater never truly slept. It just pretended to. Lyssa moved toward the main door, stopping beside the narrow observation window. She stared out at the colony, at the slow-moving patrol cruisers drifting between structures. at the towering silhouette of the gas giant dominating the sky. "You chose this place," she said. Rowan joined her at the window. "Yes. Why?" He shrugged. "Low expectations." She looked at him. He gestured toward the distant colony structures. "No one important comes here. No one asks questions. No one cares what you were before." Lyssa considered that. "And what were you before?" Rowan smiled faintly. "Tired." She didn't smile back, but her expression softened slightly. "They will come," she said. "Not fearfully. Certainly." Rowan nodded. "I assumed as much." She studied him carefully. "You are not afraid." Rowan leaned against the wall. "Oh, I'm afraid," he said. "I'm just very experienced at ignoring it." K7 chirped in agreement. Lyssa looked down at the drone. "They will not ignore you." Rowan sighed. "I was hoping you'd say something more comforting." She tilted her head. "Like what?" He thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe something like, 'Everything will be fine, Rowan. You will not regret making this terrible decision.'" Lyssa was silent for a moment. Then she said calmly, "You will probably regret it." Rowan laughed. "That's honest." "Yes." He rubbed his face again. "You know, yesterday my biggest concern was a malfunctioning refrigeration unit." Lyssa watched him closely. "And now?" Rowan gestured toward her. "Now I'm apparently involved in something that will definitely end with someone pointing a weapon at me." K7 emitted a concerned chirp. Rowan looked at the drone. "Don't worry," he said. "Statistically, I survive most of my bad decisions." Lyssa frowned slightly. "Most?" Rowan smiled faintly. "Let's not focus on the exceptions." Outside, another patrol cruiser passed overhead, slower this time. Searching. Lyssa didn't move, but Rowan noticed the subtle shift in her posture. Preparation. Calculation. He realized something then. She wasn't just running. She was waiting for the moment running stopped working. He exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, pushing himself off the wall, "if people are coming to ruin my life, the least they can do is wait until I finish my coffee." Lyssa watched him as he moved toward the small heating unit in the corner. "You joke," she said again. Rowan filled a metal container with water. "Yes." He activated the heater. The device hummed softly. "It helps," he added. She stepped closer. "How?" Rowan leaned against the counter, watching the water slowly begin to heat. "It reminds me that I still get to choose how I feel," he said. She considered that carefully, as if it were new information, as if choice itself were unfamiliar. The heater clicked softly as the water reached temperature. Rowan poured the coffee. The smell filled the hangar. Lyssa inhaled faintly. "What is that?" "Hope," Rowan said. She frowned slightly. He handed her the cup. "Also caffeine?" She accepted it cautiously, studying the rising steam. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The colony continued its slow awakening around them, and somewhere beyond its fragile walls, something was already moving toward them. By the third day, Rowan realized two things. First, Lyssa didn't sleep much. Second, she fixed things that weren't broken. He noticed it gradually. A misaligned stabilizer bracket that suddenly wasn't misaligned anymore. A power conduit that had always hummed faintly, but now rested in perfect silence. Even K7 moved more smoothly, its uneven gait corrected by adjustments Rowan hadn't seen her make. She moved through the hangar like someone restoring balance to a system that had tolerated imperfection for too long. It made him uncomfortable, not because she was doing anything wrong, because she was doing everything right. Rowan stood on a small ladder beside the wall-mounted diagnostic console, pretending to recalibrate a sensor that did not need recalibrating. He wasn't actually working. He was observing. Lyssa crouched beside a disassembled guidance module, her long fingers steady as she reconnected neural filaments thinner than hair. Her movements were precise without hesitation, efficient without appearing rushed. She didn't fumble. She didn't guess. She knew. Rowan cleared his throat. "You know," he said casually, "most people break at least 3 things before they fix one." She didn't look up. "I do not break things." "That's statistically unlikely." She paused, then looked at him. "I break expectations." Rowan blinked. "Inham." "That's worse," he admitted. Behind them, K7 emitted an approving chirp, as if it had personally endorsed her statement. Rowan glanced down at the drone. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" K7 rotated its lens toward him and chirped again, unashamed. "Traitor." Lyssa stood, holding the repaired guidance module. She walked toward the cargo hauler and reinstalled it with quiet efficiency. Rowan watched carefully. "You were trained," he said. She hesitated. That was all the confirmation he needed. "Not like a mechanic," he continued. "Mechanics learn by failure. You learn by instruction." She turned to face him fully now. "Yes." Rowan climbed down from the ladder. "Military?" "No." "Engineering Corps?" "No." He crossed his arms. "You're running out of non-threatening answers." Lyssa studied him carefully, as if measuring how much truth he could carry without collapsing under its weight. "Royal infrastructure," she said. Rowan stared at her. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "Did you just say royal?" "Yes." He rubbed his face slowly. "Of course you did." He walked past her toward the small heating unit, activating it out of habit rather than necessity. Because when confronted with galactic-scale complications, making coffee was the only reasonable response. "You know," he said, "most people who show up at my door are smugglers, debt collectors, or occasionally someone trying to sell me counterfeit engine parts." He glanced back at her. "You're the first royal infrastructure specialist fugitive I've had." Lyssa tilted her head slightly. "You are adapting well." "I am not adapting," Rowan said. "I am professionally pretending this is normal." K7 chirped sympathetically. Rowan pointed at the drone. "Don't encourage this." Lyssa watched him prepare the coffee. "You do not ask questions," she said. "I ask questions," Rowan replied. "I just don't ask the ones that would ruin my day." She considered this. "Why?" Rowan leaned against the counter, waiting for the water to heat. "Because answers come with responsibility," he said. "And I've spent a long time avoiding those." Lyssa walked closer, her posture calm but attentive. "You helped my mother." Rowan nodded. "Yes." "You accepted responsibility then." He sighed. "That was different." "How?" He thought about that. He remembered the burning transport, the screaming metal, the moment he saw her mother trapped beneath debris. "I didn't have time to think," he said finally. "Thinking makes things complicated." Lyssa watched him carefully. "And now?" Rowan handed her the coffee. "Now I have too much time." She accepted it, studying the rising steam again, as if it were some kind of controlled atmospheric anomaly. Outside, a low hum passed overhead. Rowan froze. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But Rowan had lived on Edgewater long enough to recognize every sound the colony made. This wasn't one of them. He moved to the observation window slowly. A patrol cruiser hovered in the distance. Not unusual, but it wasn't moving. It was watching. Rowan frowned. "That's new." Lyssa joined him at the window. Her posture didn't change. Her breathing didn't change. But something behind her eyes did. Recognition. "They are narrowing the search," she said quietly. Rowan nodded. "Looks like it." K7 rolled up beside them, its optical lens focusing on the distant cruiser. The drone emitted a low, uncertain tone. Rowan crossed his arms. "Well," he said, "I always wanted to be involved in something important. I just hoped it would involve less potential death." Lyssa looked at him. "You can still send me away." Rowan laughed softly. "And miss out on all this excitement?" She didn't smile. He sighed. "That wasn't a serious suggestion." She studied him. "You would be safer." Rowan nodded. "Yes." He didn't move. He didn't open the door. He didn't do anything that would make that safety real. Lyssa watched him carefully. "You are illogical." Rowan shrugged. "I've been called worse." K7 chirped in agreement. Rowan pointed at the drone again. "You are no longer qualified to comment on my life choices." The patrol cruiser remained in place outside, watching, waiting. Rowan leaned his shoulder against the wall. "You know," he said, "I used to think the universe was very large." Lyssa looked at him. "It is." Rowan shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "It just feels that way until something finds you." She understood that. He could see it in her eyes, because she had been found before. and she would be found again, unless something changed. Rowan exhaled slowly. Well, he said, pushing himself off the wall, if they're coming, the least we can do is make them work for it. Lyssa studied him carefully. You are choosing this. Rowan nodded. Yes. K7 chirped. Lyssa looked between them, at the mechanic, at the machine, at the fragile, stubborn sanctuary they had created in the middle of nowhere. And for the first time since she had arrived, she allowed herself to believe that nowhere might actually be somewhere. The first sign was the silence, not complete silence. Edgewater colony never truly stopped making noise. There was always the distant hum of reactors, the faint vibration of life support systems, the occasional metallic complaint of infrastructure that had never expected to survive this long. But this silence was different. It was organized. Rowan noticed it while standing beneath the cargo hauler, holding a calibration wand he had no intention of actually using. He tilted his head slightly, listening past the familiar sounds. Something was missing. He straightened slowly. K7, he said. The drone rolled closer, emitting a questioning chirp. Do you hear that? K7 rotated its optical lens and performed a brief environmental scan. It chirped once. Confused. Rowan nodded. Exactly. Confused was the right word. The patrol cruisers usually passed overhead every 11 minutes. Not precise, not disciplined. Edgewater's security was more symbolic than functional. But now, nothing. No cruisers, no drifting engines, no careless noise, just absence. Lyssa stood near the observation window, her posture still. Watching, waiting. They are here, she said quietly. Rowan didn't look at her. Yes. He walked toward the main console, activating the external sensor array. The outdated system flickered reluctantly to life, its display resolving into a grainy map of the surrounding colony. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then he adjusted the sensitivity, and there they were. Not patrol cruisers, not colony security, something else. 3 ships hovered at the edge of sensor range, their signatures suppressed beneath layers of distortion. Professional, deliberate, predatory. Rowan stared at the display. Well, he said calmly, that's unfortunate. K7 emitted a worried series of beeps. Lyssa stepped closer. They are not colony vessels, she said. Rowan nodded. I gathered that. He zoomed in on the nearest signature. The ship held position with absolute stability, its drive emissions carefully minimized. Watching, waiting. He leaned back in his chair. You know, he said, I miss the days when my biggest problem was an improperly installed coolant valve. Lyssa didn't respond. She was focused on the display. They will search everything, she said. Rowan glanced at her. Yes. She looked at him. You can still say you did not know. Rowan smiled faintly. I've never been very good at lying convincingly. K7 chirped in agreement. Rowan pointed at the drone. Your lack of loyalty continues to disappoint me. The drone ignored him. Lyssa studied the sensor data. They are careful, she said. Professional hunters usually are. She looked at him sharply. You have seen them before. Rowan shrugged. I've seen enough to recognize the type. He stood, moving toward a sealed compartment beneath the main console. He entered a manual override code, and the compartment hissed open. Inside rested equipment he hadn't touched in years. Signal scramblers, counter-surveillance modules. Things a simple mechanic didn't need. Things a former military engineer did. Lyssa watched him carefully. You prepared, she said. Rowan picked up one of the scramblers, examining it for degradation. I prepared to survive, he corrected. He activated the device and it hummed softly as it began emitting a localized distortion field. K7 tilted its optical lens, curious. Lyssa stepped closer. You expect them to come here? Rowan met her gaze. I expect them to come everywhere. He moved to the wall panel and activated additional countermeasures. Old defense protocols flickered awake, systems he had installed quietly, carefully, without ever expecting to use them. Until now. Lyssa watched him work. You are not surprised. Rowan paused, then shrugged. I've been waiting since you arrived. She considered that. Why? He hesitated. Because he had asked himself the same question. Because part of him had known this was inevitable. Because helping her had never been about safety. He gave the only answer that made sense. Because people like you don't arrive quietly, he said. Lyssa didn't deny it. Outside, the distant ships remained motionless. Patient. Certain. K7 emitted a soft alert tone. Rowan checked the sensor display. One of the ships had moved. Not toward them. Closer to the colony center. Searching. Systematically. Rowan exhaled slowly. They're tightening the net. Lyssa stood very still beside him, her hands relaxed at her sides. Not surrendering. Not afraid. Ready. Rowan noticed. You've been hunted before, he said. She nodded once. Yes. He studied her profile. And you survived. Yes. He smiled faintly. That's encouraging. She looked at him. You may not. Rowan laughed quietly. I appreciate your honesty. K7 chirped nervously. Rowan crouched beside the drone, resting a hand on its metal chassis. Relax, he said. Everything is fine. K7 emitted a skeptical beep. Rowan nodded. Yes, he admitted. That was a lie. Lyssa watched the interaction. You protect it, she said. Rowan shrugged. It protects me. K7 chirped proudly. Rowan stood again, returning his attention to the sensor display. The ships continued their slow, methodical search. He realized something then. They weren't rushing. They weren't worried. They knew she was here. They just needed to prove it. He rubbed his face. You know, he said, I always wondered how I'd spend the rest of my life. Lyssa looked at him. And now you know. Rowan nodded. Yes. He leaned against the console. Apparently hiding a galactic fugitive. K7 chirped. Lyssa studied him carefully. You regret it. Rowan thought about that. He thought about the quiet life he had built, the predictable routines, the safe isolation. Then he thought about the knock on his door, the rain, the choice he had made. He shook his head. No, he said. And for the first time since the ships had appeared, Lyssa allowed herself to believe him. The waiting turned time into something heavy, not slow, not fast, just heavy. Rowan discovered this while sitting in his chair, staring at the sensor display without actually seeing it. His eyes followed the faint blips of motion outside the colony, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quieter, somewhere safer, somewhere that didn't involve professional hunters methodically dismantling his future. K7 rolled past him, paused, then rolled back. It emitted a concerned chirp. Rowan didn't react. The drone extended its probe and gently tapped his boot. He looked down. Oh, Rowan said, you're still here. K7 chirped again, louder this time. Yes, Rowan replied. I know, I'm also still here. Statistically, this continues to surprise me. The drone did not appear reassured. Across the hangar, Lyssa stood near the observation window again. She had developed a habit of standing perfectly still for long periods, like a sculpture that occasionally remembered how to breathe. Rowan wasn't sure whether she was watching the ships or remembering them. Possibly both. He stood slowly, stretching his back. His joints complained immediately. That's new, he muttered. K7 chirped in agreement. I'm not old, Rowan added defensively. The drone made a sound that was clearly skeptical. Rowan pointed at it. You're made of recycled cargo container parts. You don't get to judge me. Lyssa turned slightly, observing them. You argue with machines. Rowan shrugged. They argue back. She considered that. That is inefficient. It's emotionally fulfilling, Rowan replied. She didn't understand that. He didn't expect her to. Outside, one of the distant ships shifted position again. It moved slowly, deliberately, adjusting its search pattern with patient precision. Rowan watched it through the window. They're not guessing, he said. Lyssa stepped beside him. No. They're narrowing. Yes, he nodded, which means eventually they will come here, he sighed. Yes. Silence settled between them again. Not empty silence, full silence, the kind that carried decisions inside it. Rowan crossed his arms. You know, he said, when I moved here, I had a very specific plan. Lyssa looked at him. Which was? He gestured vaguely at the hangar. This. Fix broken machines. Avoid complicated people. Grow old in a deeply unimpressive way. Lyssa studied him carefully. And now? Rowan glanced at her. Now I appear to have accidentally joined a galactic conflict. K7 chirped helpfully. Rowan nodded. Yes, thank you for summarizing. Lyssa's eyes shifted back to the ships. They will not stop. Rowan leaned against the wall. I figured. She hesitated. You can still survive. He frowned. That's an optimistic change in tone. She looked at him directly. You can tell them you did not know. Rowan smiled faintly. You keep suggesting that. Yes. He considered it. It would be easy. Convincing even. He was just a mechanic. Insignificant. Forgettable. He could step aside. Let them take her. Return to his quiet, predictable life. He imagined that life. The silence. The routine. The absence of her presence in the hangar. Something about that felt wrong. He shook his head. No, he said. Lyssa watched him closely. Why? He thought about that longer than he expected. Finally, he said, because someone once told you to find me. She didn't speak. He met her gaze. And I don't want that to have been a mistake. For a moment, Lyssa looked uncertain. Not afraid, not defensive, just uncertain. As if she didn't know what to do with that kind of answer. K7 rolled between them, chirping softly. Rowan looked down at it. You're being unusually emotional today. The drone chirped again. Yes, Rowan said. I'm aware the situation is bad. You don't need to narrate it. Lyssa tilted her head slightly. It cares. Rowan shrugged. It's programmed to assist. That is not the same thing. He hesitated. No, it wasn't. Outside, the distant ships continued their slow orbit. Patient, certain, unstoppable. Lyssa stepped away from the window. They will breach the colony soon. Rowan nodded. Yes. She looked at him. You should prepare. He smiled faintly. I've been preparing my entire life. She didn't smile back. He walked toward the old storage compartment again, opening it and removing a small handheld device, a signal beacon. Lyssa's eyes narrowed slightly. That will reveal you. Yes. He examined the device carefully. They're already looking. He turned it over in his hands. They expect you to run. She said nothing. He looked at her. But what they don't expect, he continued, is for someone to stay. She understood then, not the plan, but the choice. K7 chirped nervously. Rowan crouched beside the drone. Relax, he said quietly. We're not finished yet. He stood again, holding the beacon loosely. For the first time in years, his life had stopped being small. It had stopped being safe. It had become something else, something uncertain, something alive. Lyssa watched him carefully. You are changing, she said. Rowan considered that. Probably, he admitted. Outside, the ships moved closer, and for the first time since they had arrived, Rowan Hayes was no longer waiting for them to decide his future. The breach alarm did not sound. That was the first thing Rowan noticed. No dramatic sirens, no flashing red lights, no heroic warnings from colony control urging citizens to remain calm while absolutely nobody remained calm. Just silence, organized, intentional. Rowan stood in the center of the hangar, holding the signal beacon loosely in his hand. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the future had weight now. K7 rolled in slow circles beside him, emitting nervous, uneven chirps. I know, Rowan said quietly. I also find this deeply concerning. Lyssa stood near the observation window, her posture calm but alert. Outside, the hunter ships no longer pretended to hide. Their hulls caught the pale glow of the gas giant, smooth and deliberate, like blades waiting to be picked up. They have stopped searching, she said. Rowan nodded. Yes. K7 emitted a questioning tone. They found us, Rowan clarified. The drone immediately emitted a much louder, far more panicked series of beeps. Rowan crouched beside it. Relax, he said gently. You always overreact. K7 froze, its optical lens narrowing in disbelief. Yes, Rowan added, That was ironic. He stood again, looking toward the door. They'll come through there, he said. Lyssa stepped beside him. You can still leave. He smiled faintly. You've been saying that since you arrived. Yes. He glanced at her. I'm starting to think you don't have much confidence in my survival. She met his gaze. I have confidence in your intelligence. He laughed softly. That's worse. Outside, one of the ships descended slowly toward the colony surface. Its landing thrusters glowed with quiet precision, disturbing the dust in slow spirals. Professional, controlled, certain. Rowan felt something unexpected inside his chest. Not fear, not exactly. Clarity. He understood now that his life before Lyssa had been smaller than he realized. Safe, predictable, carefully contained. He had mistaken that for peace. But peace, he realized, wasn't the absence of danger. It was the presence of choice. K7 rolled closer to Lyssa, its metal chassis pressing lightly against her leg. She looked down at it. It stays, she said quietly. Rowan raised an eyebrow. You sound surprised. She hesitated. It does not run. Rowan nodded. It learned from me. K7 emitted a proud chirp. Footsteps echoed faintly outside the hangar. Heavy, measured, approaching. Rowan exhaled slowly. Well, he said, this is the part where my life becomes significantly more complicated. The hangar door vibrated as something connected to its external access port, not forcing entry, requesting it. Rowan blinked. That's new. Lyssa frowned slightly. They expect compliance. Rowan considered that. He walked to the control panel, paused. K7 emitted a nervous tone. Lyssa watched him carefully. You do not have to do this, she said. He looked at her. For the first time since she arrived, she looked uncertain. Not hunted, not guarded, just uncertain. He realized she wasn't afraid of the hunters. She was afraid of being abandoned. He pressed the release. The door opened. 3 figures stood outside. Tall, armored, featureless helmets concealing everything but intent. They didn't raise weapons. They didn't move. They simply stood there, waiting. One stepped forward. Lyssa Virel, the figure said, voice calm and filtered. You will come with us. Lyssa didn't move. Rowan stepped slightly in front of her. Not dramatically, not heroically, just enough. The armored figure's helmet tilted slightly. And you, it said, step aside. Rowan crossed his arms. No. K7 emitted a very brave and very unnecessary chirp. The armored figure studied him. You are not relevant. Rowan smiled faintly. That's been my entire life. Behind him, Lyssa stood very still, watching. The figure spoke again. You cannot protect her. Rowan shrugged. Probably not. Silence. Dust drifted through the open doorway. The armored figure tilted its helmet slightly, reassessing. Why? It asked. Rowan thought about that. He thought about the quiet years, the empty routines, the small, careful existence he had built. He thought about the knock on the door, the rain, the choice. He answered honestly. Because someone once trusted me to help, he said. Silence followed. Longer this time. Then slowly the armored figure stepped back. Not retreating, acknowledging. It turned its helmet toward Lyssa. You were correct, it said. Lyssa exhaled softly. Rowan blinked. I'm sorry, he said. What? Lyssa stepped forward. They were never sent to capture me, she said quietly. Rowan stared at her. They were sent to confirm. Confirm what? She met his gaze. That my mother was right. The armored figure stepped aside, lowering their weapons, not in surrender, in respect. Rowan looked between them, confused. I feel like I missed an important part of this story. Lyssa smiled. Not small, not hesitant, real. My people are rebuilding, she said, but we do not rebuild with power. She looked at him. We rebuild with trust. Understanding arrived slowly, painfully. You weren't looking for protection, Rowan said. No. You were looking for me. Yes. K7 chirped proudly. Rowan laughed softly, shaking his head. This is significantly less terrible than I expected. The armored figures turned and returned to their ship. Lyssa remained, standing in the doorway. She looked at Rowan. "You can come with us." He hesitated. He looked at the hangar, the tools, the machines, the life he had known. Then he looked at her, at the future he had never expected. He smiled faintly. "I think," he said slowly, "I've spent enough time hiding." K7 chirped excitedly. Lyssa stepped beside him. Together they walked forward, not running, not hiding, choosing. And for the first time in his life, Rowan Hayes wasn't surviving. He was beginning.